I think we're live. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to After Long Road. Thank you for joining us this evening, and I'm really sorry to drag you away from what must be the loveliest day of the year and possibly some football this evening. But I hope you find tonight's webinar will provide you with useful information so that you can help your daughter or son explore opportunities and make decisions over the next year. My name is Dr. Harriet Riches. I joined Long Road as Assistant Principal overseeing student care, guidance and progression in January, so I'm delighted to meet you all, even if virtually for now. Before we get started properly, I just have a few housekeeping notes. We would be really grateful for your patience as we navigate Teams events live this evening. Although we've all lived our lives online for over a year, this is the first time this event has been organised virtually, and our Head of Progression, Andy Goodwin, is hard at work behind the scenes. So please bear with us through any technical glitches that may arise. We're going to have time for questions after each talk, and you should be able to see the Q&A function on the right-hand side of your screen. I'll open the Q&A part way through each talk and pass questions to each of the speakers at the end of their presentation. I'll post a message to say when the Q&A is open, and then you can type in your question and we'll review them. We're going to try and answer all of our questions, but we don't know how many we'll have or how much time we've got, and any that we can't or that we don't have time for, we'll try to answer afterwards and create an FAQ that will circulate with the recording of the event. So again, thanks for coming. We have a great programme this evening, which is focused on answering some of the key questions that parents and families all have about progression. To help us, I'm really pleased to welcome a series of guest speakers, and I'm going to give you the timings just in case you want to pop out and check any scores. We're going to kick off with some advice from our own senior guidance team, from our heads of studies, Niamh McNabb and Tim Whitaker, who will talk about the support that's in place for students over the next year. This is followed by a talk by Harriet Dodsworth from Form the Future at 6:20. Talking about apprenticeships, and her talk will give you info about both apprenticeships and degree apprenticeships and a sense of the local situation and what to expect in the post-COVID world, if we ever get to the post-COVID world. At 6:45, we're joined by Emily Warner, who is the Student Recruitment Officer from the University of Essex, and she's going to be talking to us about developing persuasive personal statements. This is followed at 7:10 by Beth Howe, who is a College Engagement Officer from Anglia Ruskin University, who will give you the lowdown on student finance, hopefully busting some myths but giving you the facts that you need. And we'll finish up with the last talk of the event from Andy Goodwin, our own Head of Progression, at 7:35. And Andy's talk is on strengthening student portfolios and giving some advice about boosting work experience and building CVs. And he can answer questions about progression more generally. Well, we're not able to provide as many sessions this evening as we would like to at this event, but we have drawn on previous parent feedback to identify particular areas of concern. And we know from our recent parent surveys that over half of your children are currently planning to go on to higher education at university when they leave us next year. But this recent survey also revealed that nearly 20% of you answered that they don't seem to have thought about it. But please don't panic. This is the biggest life decision yet for your young people. The next few months will give them the time and space to really think about what's right for them. A little bit about the support that we have in place. Over the past term, in our Year 1 tutorial sessions, our team of progress coaches have been providing their students with information and strategies to explore and evaluate the different options and routes available, namely different routes and types of courses in higher education, different types of university and college environments, apprenticeships and higher and degree apprenticeships, employability skills and routes into employment and self-employment, planning productive and life-changing gap years, and also encourage them to attend UCAS Discovery Weeks to explore options. And this week, Andy, who you'll be hearing from at the end of the event, has also coordinated an exciting programme of sessions for Progression Week. This has included subject-related sessions to demonstrate how the subjects our students love can be applied in employment and have relevance in the professional world, university taster lectures in subjects including psychology, art and design, history and business, as well as practical hands-on sessions to help students register with UCAS and get started. So please do encourage your children to engage over the rest of the week. There's still lots to come. And in a moment, my colleagues Tim and Neve will speak more about the support in place now and over the coming months. But I wanted to take this opportunity to talk a bit about you, about parents and families. Research shows that parents and families have a huge influence on young people's decision making, but that almost half don't feel confident in their knowledge and often have to rely on their own experiences, which they feel is not always the most up to date. So we want to help you feel more confident in helping your children through these very challenging times. We know that this cohort have missed out on opportunities. They have not all been able to have the part-time jobs or work experience or volunteering experience that might build that confidence or enable them to explore different types of job roles. But I do want to say that the outlook is changing and changing quite rapidly, and recent discussions with local business leaders and our employability skills advisors show that in the region, job opportunities are opening up all the time. There are lots of unfilled apprenticeships currently, and there's more demand in our labour market compared to the national picture. In addition, lots of local industries are very keen to support this cohort of students and help them develop the key employability skills that they need to get a good job, but also to set them up for success, whatever route they choose to take. We have lots of information about exciting opportunities and activities over the summer holiday, so please do make sure that you read our emails and look at our careers EMAG for further information. So like you, we want to set up our students for the world today and for tomorrow, and we know that world is changing. Jobs and careers for life will no longer be the norm, and many jobs and even whole career paths will be replaced over the next 20 or 30 or 40 years. So we need to help people build the flexibility to manage portfolio careers. We do know that technical skills are in demand and always will be, so we need to make sure that all young people are digitally literate and confident. We know that mid-skilled jobs are at higher risk over the medium and long term, and that there will be increased demand for what are called lower skilled jobs or non-routine work that can only be done by human beings as we care for the health and well-being of the nation. But we also know that all of the jobs of the future will need so-called soft skills, which are increasingly the most important skills that employees are looking for in the workforce. And these really are skills for success. Out of interest, currently the #1 skill set in demand is high-level computing skills, as you might expect. But this is closely followed by social skills, emotional intelligence, the ability to collaborate and work together and to communicate. And thirdly, complex and creative problem solving skills. And these are skills that all young people can develop and build. So my final message to you before I hand over to Neve is #1, think about how you can support your young people to develop these skills through encouraging part-time work, encouraging them to engage in enrichment activities such as volunteering or programmes like Duke of Edinburgh scheme, encouraging them to develop creative skills and take opportunities to develop work experience. We have the summer holiday coming up. Help them plan it productively. Reach out for help at college from their progress coach or our careers team. Ask them again, badger them a little bit, quite lightly. And #2 is to keep an open mind and to help them explore the many different opportunities in post-18 education. We know that university is not for everyone, but a report from the Higher Education Policy Institute just this week presented really persuasive statistics about gaining further qualifications after sixth form. And their evidence shows that young people that take any higher level qualifications over their lifetime. And this can be a level 4 or level 5 higher national certificate or higher national diploma, a higher apprenticeship, as well as the traditional level 3 or 4 year degree. These students have higher salaries over their lifetime, but also greater flexibility and better ability to up or reskill, and so more lifelong activities. So there is no single university or higher education experience. So we will be working with students to make sure that they're aware of all of the different kinds of opportunities and support that's available for them. And we'll be doing that between now and this time next year to help them make the right decision. So I'm going to hand over now to my colleague, Head of Studies, Niamh McNabb. And while we do the handover, I will open the Q&A. So please do pop in any questions for Tim and Niamh as they talk, and we will move on to answer them as they finish. Thank you.
Thank you, Harriet, and thank you for joining us this evening. As Harriet says, I'm one of two managers of the guidance team, and no doubt I have met many of you out there, or at least spoken to you on the phone or communicated with you by email with regards to helping and supporting your children. So while Andy just brings up our first slide, the first thing I want to talk through is about the internal college processes about applying to university. So right now we're running UCAS workshops to get students registered. They're every Tuesday and Wednesday afternoon, and it's just an opportunity for them to familiarise themselves with the UCAS website and application process. Tim is working with our competitive entry students, the Cambridge, Oxford, those applying for medicine and veterinary science, and he'll talk about a little bit about that after me. Over the summer and then the first half term of next year, students need to be doing their course research as well as researching universities. Remember, not every course is the same at every university. Attending open days, many of which will be virtual right now. And they can use the UCAS website for that, or opendays.com is a very good source of information. In the week beginning the 4th of October, we have a series of exams for A-level students and some of our applied general students, so what we call Key Assessment 5, and that's actually going to feed into the UCAS predicted grade. And the grades will be set and then not changed after that. So it won't necessarily be the grade from that exam, but that will be a major source of evidence. The results will be sent to you by the 25th of October, so that's the week of half term, and then so that'll be available via Pro Portal, and then that'll be followed up with Parents' Evening on the 2nd and 3rd of November, so you can talk to teachers. The competitive entry students, we want all of them in by the 1st of October. That second half term, so between October half term and Christmas, every year 2 student will have a one-to-one with their progress coach, where they can finalise their ideas, they can get individual feedback and their personal statements. We'll still be running additional UCAS workshops for them, with the aim that every UCAS application is finished by the end of term, the 17th of December. So that's our plan. We know that some will come in after that, but that half term is the period that we want that all done, and then progress coaches can get down to the busy work of producing references. But there are a series of additional UCAS deadlines that you need to be aware of, and you need to be aware of the process that happens next. If you look up the UCAS deadline, you'll see it's the 26th of January or the 15th of October for Oxbridge medics and vets. What that actually means is that all applications before that date, or those dates, are treated equally. We want students to have finished long before that, in particular because there is a mock week just before, so that week of the 21st, and it's really important that second year students focus on those exams. You know, if there is any risk of exams being cancelled next year, the data, the evidence from those exams will be really important. On the 25th of February, UCAS Extra opens. What is that? That means that if a student has is not holding any offers, hasn't accepted any, they can add another. By the 19th of May, all universities will have got back to applicants, and then they need to confirm their choices by the 9th of June. If they don't confirm by the 9th of June, then they can lose the offer. The 20th of June is the last possible time that they can apply and go through the normal process. Anything after that gets entered into clearing, and clearing is really a way of how universities and colleges fill any places that are unfilled. It'll be dependent on which ones are popular, and they can set any entry requirements, and clearing runs right through until after A-level results day, and that's provisionally set now for the 18th of August. But as we know, there is possibility for these things to change. So I'm going to hand over to my colleague Tim, who will talk to you about Oxford, Cambridge, medicine, veterinary science and competitive entry UCAS applications.
Excellent, thank you, Niamh. Yeah, as Niamh says, I'm Tim Whitaker, one of the other heads of study. I just want to sort of quickly talk to you about the fact that we've got about 160 students at the moment who we have been emailing regularly, quite a frequent sort of email base there, to talk to them about the competitive universities. Last year we had over 50 of our universities students go to these Russell groups. Now they're the public research universities that include Cambridge and Oxford that Niamh's just been talking about. What do we do with these students? Well, we start to prepare them early for their competitive university applications. We look at extra and super curricular activities. That's making sure that they can sort of prove they're quite a rounded personality there. It's not just academia, there's more to them than that, but also start to develop a deeper academic interest as well in their chosen subjects. We do this with our Oxford students, and we do this also with our Med Squad students. So the Med Squad there focus really on the students that are really looking at medicine, vet science, dentistry. We meet frequently with them and we go through those processes. Things are going well at the moment. We've started their applications. They're working hard with us. In fact, we just had 2 newly qualified doctors from Cambridge University talk to our med students yesterday. It was a cracking session and it really motivated them. Same with the Oxbridge students as well. We meet frequently with those, and we've been having talks from universities. In fact, you can see some of the universities there from the Russell groups in that bottom bar that we've been sort of meeting and doing webinars with. We've got York next week as well as part of that, and we've got a trip to Cambridge coming up soon. Now, all is not lost. If you think your son or daughter hasn't sort of signed up for one of these, it's not too late. Tell them to get in touch with their progress coach. They'll know who they are because that's where their tutorials are. We've been talking about them then, and I'm pretty sure we can sort of get them sort of entered and talked to. Right, let me get back to Niamh now, who just wants to finish off with another slide, and we'll go from there. Thank you, Niamh.
Thank you, Tim. It's not all about university. It's really important to be aware of that. All our progress coaches are fully trained and qualified in careers, information, advice and guidance. Their knowledge really does know no bounds. All year ones, as Harriet points out, they've already had this information in tutorials, in meetings with their progress coach and in lessons as well. So when I said before, all year 2 students will have a one-to-one with their progress coach between October half term and Christmas, that's all, even those not applying to university, and so it means that we can make sure that they have a plan, and then we'll meet them again between Easter, between February half term and Easter, to make sure that they're on track. We do run a whole series of events. So as Harriet says, this week we've got the progression events. Andy runs a series of careers and apprenticeship events between Christmas and Easter, and he'll talk about those later. So please don't think that this is only about university. We do provide support for other avenues as well, employment and apprenticeship. So I'm going to come to the questions. Get back to the published ones. So first, so there's a question from Vicky. If a student plans to take a gap year and apply post results, do they have to register with UCAS this year? Can the college support them with the uni application after they leave? We do normally recommend that students apply for a deferred entry, because then they can get the full help and support while they're here. We are really very busy around the UCAS time. We do provide references for students when they've left. But providing a support above and beyond that, it is quite limited. It is better for them to go through the process, even if they don't finalise the application, at least they're familiar with it. So we would recommend that they do it this year while everything is in place. Question from Anonymous. Does this apply for students not doing A-levels per se, but are thinking of doing a foundation course, a degree course? Absolutely. We have many students from our applied general programs who go on and go to university. It is not limited to A-level. The support systems are exactly the same, and we think of them in exactly the same way.
Yeah, I could just pass on that as well, Neve. The student that's gone to Oxford for, this year was doing a 180 Art Foundation and is now at Oxford University doing their fine art degree. And I've got a sports student who's doing his PhD at Birmingham, having got a first there in his undergraduate studies. So it just shows that actually the Russell Group, as well as other universities, absolutely love the applied diploma courses as well.
Tim, I think you should be able to answer that. There's a last one. Are degree-based apprenticeships such as nursing managed under UCAS?
Some are, that's right, yes. And of course our progress coaches will help you with those as well. It's a great course, isn't it, with nursing? You can go degree course or you can go apprenticeship now. Come and see your progress coach. They'll know all about that and be able to talk about specific courses for you.
Okay, so I think that's our part done. That's all the published questions. If any other questions come up, please don't hesitate to get in touch with me or Tim directly, or your child's progress coach. We're always very happy to help. Hope the rest of the evening is informative and productive. And so I'm going to hand back now to Harriet Riches.
Thank you. Yeah, there are a few more questions. I didn't publish all of them where they covered the same area, but I'll make sure that we put them all in an FAQ so all of them are answered. So thank you for those questions. And thank you, Tim and Neve, for that overview. And we're trying to squeeze in a lot this evening. But I'm really delighted next to have Harriet Dodsworth speaking. And Harriet is from Form the Future, which is an organisation that really supports young people into meaningful employment and helps them develop the skills that they need. And she's a project coordinator there. And she's going to be talking to you about apprenticeships in the local context. So I'm delighted to hand over to Harriet now.
Good evening. Just pop me a thumbs up if that's all okay and you can hear me just fine. Fantastic. Okay. Just to double check, Andy, my presentation, is it popped up for you? Because I unfortunately can't see it just yet.
If you could just play it for us, it's in slide mode at the moment.
Okay, 2 ticks. Is that all okay?
Yes, that's it now.
Perfect. So thank you, Harriet, for that very warm and welcome introduction. My name's Harriet. I work for a company called From the Future. What I'd like to do is just support you with that key point that both Tim had mentioned there about apprenticeships and what they look like for 2021 and further into 2022. So what is an apprenticeship? Now, an apprenticeship, there's a common myth that it's for people that are low skilled and have no aspirations to achieve, and that absolutely isn't true. It's essentially a job that leads to gaining a formal qualification. And that's really important to remember, that you do gain a qualification at the end of any apprenticeship. Those apprenticeships do vary, and I think the most important thing to kind of remind everyone is that as a parent, you can absolutely support your young teenager into what they would like to do in the future. Levels start from level 2, which is when you've left school at 16 and potentially you're not wanting to go to sixth form. But what I'd like to concentrate on today is degree level apprenticeships and higher. It's an opportunity to blend working but also learning at the same time. It's a fantastic way into a career, and it absolutely is just one pathway of many. What you can expect, what your children can expect, that from an apprenticeship, your working week would look something a little bit like this. It's 80% learning and 20%, so it's 20% learning, 80% on the job. So what employers often do is they provide a study day, and that can often be on a Monday or Friday. Now, pre-pandemic, the courses probably would have been within the training providers' facilities. However, because of the pandemic and the changes that we've seen, a lot of the training now will be virtually, and it will all be online. Then they'll also have the weekends and the evenings to complete any additional studies outside of that 20% study. I want to just sort of reassure everybody that there are still a lot of opportunities when it comes to apprenticeships, and on the screen are just some things that I'd like to highlight. And I think as we've seen in the pandemic, what we've seen an increase in is digital marketing, social media, actually hospitality. There's a lot of opportunities in hospitality because actually it took quite a hit pre-pandemic. Now they're coming out of that situation. There's a lot of opportunities opening up. A hell of a lot of opportunities in recruitment as well. So there really is a really broad spectrum of opportunities, and I think even more in the Cambridge area, I've seen an absolute increase in the amount of apprenticeships and the amount of interest as well in apprenticeships has actually absolutely just boomed. What I would also like to just to highlight, and I think it's appropriate to mention, that the national wage for apprentices have actually gone up. So if you're between the ages of 16 to 19, it's now gone up to £4.20. It was about £3.19 previously, which was incredibly low. Employers do tend to top up that salary, so they, I think, a typical and what you can expect from, let's say, a degree level apprenticeship, you can earn anything from sort of 18,000 to 22, depending on the type of apprenticeship that you're looking to go into. I have to mention Kickstart. It has absolutely affected apprenticeships. So Kickstart is, I'm sure you've heard of it, is a programme for those aged 18 to 24 to get back into employment. And it really is a way for young people to experience what it is like to have a job and work experience and things like that. It has kind of taken sort of shine away from those that weren't currently in education. However, when we're talking about long road sixth form leavers, hopefully this won't affect too much, because actually these people would be looking to go into apprenticeships. So what I will still say is very competitive, and the most important thing to remember is that these are jobs. So just like you would look for any other job, you will be going against people similar to yourself, or perhaps potentially with more work experience. Also, another expectation, of course, there will be virtual learning and working. So working from home is now the new norm. It's important that it's quite scary, I think, to think that your first job out of education may not be your typical go into an office, sit down, meet the team. And I think that's something you have to mentally kind of prepare as well for them, that unfortunately they may not receive that experience straight away. But hopefully, as we see the changes come through, fingers crossed that we see that, and eventually that will go back to normal. So feedback from the employers and what they're saying, and I think it's really important to think about this. Whilst it's quite earlier on in the year, when we talk about apprenticeships, you can never go wrong by being prepared. And the feedback we've had from employers are that the interviews, both face-to-face and virtually, they just don't feel as though the young person is that prepared. They've often not used the STAR method, or potentially aren't even aware of what that STAR method even is. They're applying a little bit too late. So how apprenticeships tend to work is there are two recruitment phases, one in September and one in January. So if you're looking to start in September, let's say per se for the long road sixth formers, then you really ideally want to be thinking about this November and start applying and looking for it around January. And the reason for that is because employers have a huge amount of applications, and often they're very, very popular. And it's just like you would be prepared for UCAS and putting in your personal summary in early time. You should think about that when applying for apprenticeships as well. There was also, they demonstrated lack of understanding of the role or the company. So as a tip, it's always a good idea to research the company, just like you would a university. You take an interest as to where the university is, what's around, what you'd be looking for. It's important that you apply that kind of method to when you think about applying for an apprenticeship. Now, one other feedback is that qualifications and experience are just as important. So encourage them to keep working at this with second year. It's important that they achieve their grades, whether they're doing A-level, whether they're doing a BTEC, or whatever they may be doing. Those grades will support them in being able to gain that apprenticeship, if that's something that they would like to do. On the flip side of that, if they are doing studies and they're finding that actually they're not enjoying it, and they know that they want to be in the world of work, if they're lacking experience, as in work experience, it's still as important to please try and give your last year at A-level, BTEC, or whatever it may be, a really good go, because it will be so important when it gets to that application phase. And just a final one is that at interviews, they just lacked sort of skills in being able to actually demonstrate what their skills. So what I would say is, if they've done anything in the pandemic, encourage them to talk about it in interviews, whether that is picking up their grandmother's shopping, whether it's organising a Zoom call for a family night for everyone to get together. I know they don't realise it, but having the ability to be organised, communicate, that is all very relevant. Employers are not expecting the young people to have had a year's worth of experience. The situation we've been in has just made it completely impossible, and it saddens me deeply that they've missed out on that opportunity. So I think it's important to remember that these little things that they think aren't significant really are, and to remind them of that you know, helping out, if they've had the privilege to potentially help out someone grow their social media, or if they've done that themselves, then use that in when it comes to interviews, and harness those skills to really kind of articulate it at interview. Ways in which we compare these young people. So if we are much like we're thinking about university, it's important, if we think about apprenticeships, to really be prepared, keep up to date with what's going on in the industry. So I would always recommend that a young person registers on the government website. That is a great way to look at the live vacancies going on in the area. You can minimise it by how many miles, at what level, and what area, and what kind of apprenticeship. Have a play around with it, maybe work with them on it, and just spend a couple of, maybe half an hour, 40 minutes just with them, looking through the different options, familiarising themselves with the website. It would just be really useful, so that when you do come to wanting to apply for apprenticeship, you're really familiar with that process. Just a few additional websites that I would also recommend. Of course, there are the ones that I'm sure we're all familiar with in terms of Reed, CV Library. LinkedIn is also a great way. A lot of employers are now advertising a lot of vacancies in LinkedIn. I can totally appreciate they might not have a LinkedIn account right now, but it's a great idea to start thinking about that. LinkedIn is a great way to social network professionally with employers, and employers see it as almost like an online CV. So I'd really highly recommend start to talk about and have those conversations about what the professional platforms a young person should have as they look to go into the world of work. And just a little bit about how we from the future can support the young people. In addition of the support that Long Road so provide and so perfectly, we also offer one-to-one career advice. So if a young person may be interested in an apprenticeship but really is not sure what industry, what sector, what level, what could be right with them, whether they feel they would like to do a degree and then unsure about where they may study, we welcome one-to-one career advice, and that will be facilitated through perhaps Andy at Long Road, and he will support in facilitating that. We're also offering employability skills workshops throughout the summer, so this is more about preparing them for applications and exercising their interview skills. And what I've mentioned previously is that employers have really kind of brought that up when it's come to feedback, is that young people just don't come across as if they're prepared for an interview. So it's really a great way of practicing and just preparing yourself, even preparing yourself for an interview, having an interview for potentially for university, that it's still great practice, and I would recommend trying to do that as often as you can. What I'd also recommend is, if you would like to keep up to date with any events that we've got going on, we often run events throughout the year, and these are virtually at the moment. These are our social channels. If you wish to follow us on there, we would welcome a follow, a like, whatever you wish to do. So just before I finish, I would love to answer some questions if you've got any, and yeah, I hope that was all okay.
Harriet, if you could just check your Q&A box at the top of your screen, you should be able to pick up questions there.
Perfect.
Hi, Harriet. Yeah, if you look at the ones under published, then they're the ones that I've kind of filtered through. There's a interest in the STAR method, so I've
STAR method, yeah.
That one. Can you see them okay?
Yeah, they're just loading.
I think everyone's laptop is really struggling in the heat today.
Yeah, mine's
wearing away,
but it's all okay. So the STAR method, it's commonly known, and the STAR method is situation, task, action, and result. So it's a way in which you demonstrate. It's often a competency question. So that's often a question where you may be asked, describe a time where you were resilient in your role, or describe a time where you showed great communication skills at sixth form. So you have to respond with that style, and it just hits all the key points and it just demonstrates to an employer everything that they're looking for. And it's a good idea to practice that. So I'll just repeat it as well. So it's situation, task, action and result. Are there any? Absolutely. We actually recently ran an Insights into the Creative Industry event, and we had a lot of local employers sharing their vacancies. I would say probably about 60% of them were apprenticeships. So what I would be more than happy to do, Andrea, if you would like to get in contact with your career advisor or whoever would be able to better support you, I am more than happy to share some of the vacancies that we know that we've seen and what we're working with. But there absolutely is, and by creative that's really broad, so I wanted just to understand what that may be. Creative could be digital, so it could be web development, it could be digital marketing, or it could easily be like fashion design, or it could be art. So it's important when you talk about creative you understand exactly what it is that you're thinking about. How many years would a degree equivalent take? So if we're thinking about taking a degree level apprenticeship, they're about 4 years. That is because, of course, it's a little bit lengthened out because you are working as well as studying. And it is not an easy option. A degree level apprenticeship is, I would say, exactly equivalent to going to university. It is down to you to fit in your study time. You have that responsibility and you have, of course, that one day, but you'll also be expected to do that over the course of the evening and weekends. At the end of the 4 years, you'll, of course, have a assessment, which you will then be, that's how you'll get your final mark. So you can expect them to be around 4 years. What is the website for apprenticeships called? So for the actual official government website, that's pretty easy. I will ask if Andy, if you've got, I can post it into the chat once I finish talking, and then you could perhaps post it and then they'll have access to that. Is it possible to defer apprenticeship if you decide to take a gap year? Yes, it absolutely is. But what I would suggest is that your gap year is filled with experience, and I would suggest that's filled with work experience, whether that's voluntary or paid. When you come to finishing your gap year, it's important that you fill that time with things that you can bring to that role. So if you're thinking about travelling, essentially, if you're thinking about travelling, look at what you can do whilst you're travelling to learn new skills or develop ones that you already harness. I think it's really important, and a little bit of a myth that you can take a year out and travel, come back and expect to get a job. It's important that you use that year out to the best of your advantage. Yes, okay, I get it, have fun, enjoy, live life, but please try and develop skills where you can. Can the children do a degree not specifically related to police, or is it recommended to do ones related? I've heard that the apprenticeship is a great idea but difficult to get into. So the police, we've actually got an event called Insights into Uniform Services, and that is on the 8th of July. So I would recommend, if Long Road would love to share that with the students and parents. Parents are more than welcome to come along. We will have people from the police, the Army, Navy, NHS there present. You do not have to necessarily do a degree in policing to get into it, no. An apprenticeship is probably, you can do a level 3 initially to begin with. And what you can then do is, once you've completed your level 3, you can then go on to a degree level. And also, I would also kind of say that once you kind of go into an apprenticeship, it is a commitment. So I would like you to really ensure that that is the career path that you'd like to follow. I would say it's difficult to get into, much like it is any other role, job, because it is super competitive, and I think that they offer brilliant packages, and you think about the experience you gain as a young person that you wouldn't necessarily have got elsewhere. So what I would also suggest is coming along to the event, keeping up to date with the latest vacancies, and if you do require support, specifically applying for the police, then either talk to your career advisors, or we are here as a means of support. So do Form the Future or other organisations have support guides for students with additional needs? Yes, we would basically work with a third-party organisation that we actually held a event for insights into those with additional needs. So we specifically held an event for employers that were disability confident and were ready to offer opportunities for anyone that may have any sort of additional need and support. We particularly would recommend that if you do have an additional need and additional support, it's difficult because of the pandemic and everything is pretty much virtual, but we'd want to probably speak to that person in a one-to-one setting, have a one-to-one with them and really support them through that process, right through from even looking for an opportunity to actually applying for an opportunity and potentially even waiting to see what their response is, because whether they're successful or whether they perhaps weren't successful, it's about channeling that feedback and how you can then use that to go on to another opportunity. I think it's really important to understand that when you also look for an apprenticeship and you have additional needs, you can sense check and see if they're disability confident, and that will also tell you about the employer and whether that employer is actually really right for you. However, if they're not disability confident and you really would like to work with them, there is absolutely no harm in submitting your application and requesting and asking if they are willing to look into doing that, because it's great. And also we have those conversations with employers. So I think it's really important that employers know that they have attracted the right audience, and actually what they need to do is change some of the things that they do internally to support that young person. Sorry, I've got a lot of questions.
Hi, sorry, Emily, I know it's hard to read them. Yeah, we've got a couple more minutes if you don't mind answering a few more.
So how do you access employability skills workshops? So we will be sending out, we're going to set up some dates for the summer and we'll send those out to Andy, and Andy will happily share them with you, with both the parents and the young people. We thought by doing it in the summer, it just keeps them engaged, keeps them busy, maybe something to look forward to, she says, hopefully. But yes, they will be accessed online. We'll do those all virtually and it will be done through Teams, and you can expect direct links from my contact at Long Road. And I'm sorry I'm putting this on you, Andy, but I believe it will be you. Yes, but yes, the uniform services will also include in fire and rescue, where I'm trying to get Cambridge as well as Cossenham along, so please expect them to be there, absolutely. Can I direct you to any websites that focus on apprenticeships in the creative industry specifically? I believe I've got access to the forum. I will just check for that. I'm not a career advisor, but in your career advice session, they will have more access to different websites than I will. However, what I can actually send you is the vacancies that I'm aware of, the creative vacancies I'm aware of ahead of the event that we had last week, and they are live. And what is also a great idea is if you know that companies are hiring now, the likelihood is they're going to be hiring next year. So when you are thinking about coming to the end of your sixth form and what is next after that, it's a great idea now to make connections, speak to employers and see what kind of opportunities they're going to be offering next year. Got a couple more minutes.
I think we've probably got the time for a couple more. I think there's a question around whether it limits where you might work later in your career is quite interesting. I don't know if you've got any insight into that.
I guess what I would say is that speaking to apprentices that have completed their apprenticeship, it's really been an amazing beneficial factor. You've never been marked down for doing an apprenticeship at an early age, just as much as what you wouldn't be looked at differently if you if you went to university and did a degree. There's no kind of there's no rules about life. What you decide to do is down to you. It's more about how you demonstrate that. So if you've done an apprenticeship and you're not able to demonstrate how that apprenticeship's helped you in terms of your skills and your ability to do the role, then yeah, I get it. I understand why that would happen. However, I would like to think that you would be able to use that apprenticeship to support you in your early career development, and it's a stepping stone into your career. So it does not hold you back whatsoever. Please don't think it's universe against apprenticeships. That is not the case. In my opinion, they're equal. It's just two different pathways, and you decide what you would prefer to do. Teaching and childcare. That's really popular at the moment. There is a lot of teaching apprenticeships. Childcare, I don't believe there's as much childcare. I think that's more because there's more care needed in the NHS, and I think also in elderly care homes. I haven't seen too many childcare apprenticeships, but I have seen a lot of ones advertised in the NHS. So especially if you're close to Cambridgeshire, you know, we've got Patworth, we've got Adam Brooks. There's a lot of opportunities in the local area for you to access. I think that's all of them.
I think we've come to the end of your questions, Harriet. There was just one more about whether you're happy to share your PowerPoint that we can circulate after the event. I hope you will, so we can send on the links. And the information.
Yes, that's absolutely fine.
Thank you. Right, thanks very much, Harriet. That was brilliant, really interesting, and I know there's lots of interest from students and parents about this particularly. But I'm really delighted now to welcome Emily Warner, who's one of the recruitment officers from the University of Essex, and she's joining us this evening to talk about writing personal statements, which I know is something that parents may wish to get involved in. So I will now hand it over to Emily if she's ready to go, and thank you again, Harriet.
Emily, you're now live, and I'm just waiting for Harriet, who's just been speaking, to stop sharing her presentation, and then I'll ask you to share yours.
Yeah,
but
lovely.
if you maybe like to start by just telling us a little bit about yourself, and you can share your PowerPoint now as well. Thank you.
Okay, yeah, so hopefully you can see my slides there. So yeah, my name's Emily. I'm from the University of Essex, where I work as a student recruitment officer. Now, I believe slightly earlier in the event this evening, you've heard a little bit about the UCAS application. So I'm just going to speak to a little bit about personal statements in particular, and then perhaps touch on a few details about what happens after your application's been submitted as well. So hopefully I'll get through this nice and swiftly and allow some time for questions afterwards as well. Just a quick brief bit of information on Essex. So you can see some of our rankings on the screen there. We are a campus-based university in Colchester. We also have a campus in Southend and Loughton as well. Wide range of subjects offered, and we've got teaching excellence gold rating, and we rank really highly for our research as well. And once we get to the end, I'll leave some information or contact details if you are interested in Essex or your children are interested in Essex, then do get in contact with us. Moving on then, personal statements. So some will say, or certainly everyone will say, that the most important part of the UCAS application is the personal statement. And the reason for this, this is the main opportunity for students to kind of sell themselves and give the opportunity to stand out against other applicants. So it's literally the only way they can tailor their kind of application. And they do this by writing the personal statement. For this, they have 47 lines or 4,000 characters, which is the maximum that you can have, and that 4,000 characters does include punctuation and spacing as well. So there is quite a tight kind of limit on how long the personal statement can be, which is why we often run sessions for students to kind of support the process of drafting and writing a personal statement. And essentially the purpose of the personal statement is for them to explain why they are applying. So for the academic selectors that will be reading through the personal statements, they'll want to know why they're interested in their course in particular, what it is that excites it about them, what their plans are for the future, and what they hope to get out of university. One thing to stress from the outset is that one single statement, so one personal statement, will go to all 5 of their choices. So as you probably are aware by now, students can apply to up to 5 courses / universities, but you can only write one personal statement. So this personal statement needs to apply to all the courses and all of the universities that they're applying for. So that can be quite challenging, particularly if they're interested in courses, vastly different courses at different universities. It can be quite challenging to make the personal statement relevant to 2 different courses, but I'll touch on that a little bit as we go through as well. So in terms of the content of the personal statement, we usually advise that students have a 70-30% split in terms of how the content of the personal statement is structured. So we usually say 70%, so the majority of the personal statement should be about the course itself. So first of all, one of the first things we say, your opening statement or sentence within your personal statement should clearly identify what course or certainly what subject area that you're applying for, and then why you've chosen that. So that could be because you've studied it at A level or at GCSE and are really interested in it. It's something that you are involved in, so the student's involved in outside of school, and they wish to learn more about it, or they've got a particular career path in mind and they need to undertake that course in order to set them down that path to get to that career. Now, within this 70% is also where we would encourage students to talk about their academic experience and current studies, and how they relate to the course that they want to study. So it could be that they're currently studying A-level history, and they want to go on and do a Bachelor of Arts in history. And so they might detail that that's what they're currently studying, and then think about some of the content that they've studied that they found particularly interesting. So, for example, if they studied ancient history, they found that particularly interesting. They would like to, expand their knowledge in that area, and that is why they would like to go on and do a BA history degree at X university. This is not purely limited to their current learning. So their current time at school or college, but it can also be any work or voluntary experience that they've got that can be related to the course. So if they've got a part-time job that kind of lends itself to where they want to progress in the future and that relates to their course, then again we would encourage them to incorporate it into the personal statement as well. Similarly, if they've got involved in any volunteering experiences that can be related to the course, to include them in this part as well. And as I already mentioned, career aspirations and any existing skills that they've got. So all of this content in here is their opportunity to really go, to really show off what they've kind of done and experienced so far. That means they're going to then go on to succeed in completing a course at university in that particular subject area. And I'm going to give some tips, some do's and don'ts, and some kind of content suggestions as we go through, but just as a summary, so 70% about the course itself, which means the other 30% then is about the student themselves. So we tend to say this is more about stuff they do outside of their kind of academic life currently, so any hobbies and interests they've got, again any part-time work, if they've taken a gap year or plan to take a gap year prior to applying to university. What have they done in their gap year? What skills have they learnt from that gap year, or what skills have they gained from the hobbies or interests that they currently have? And that can often be quite challenging for students to really sit and look at their hobbies or the activities they do outside of school and kind of identify some kind of skills from that they can pull out and demonstrate in their personal statement. And again, I'm going to give some advice and so some kind of exercises and thought processes and planning that can help students to really look at that carefully. One of the main things to include, mostly in kind of the conclusion of the student's personal statement, is what they hope to get out of university. Now, obviously, that may be something as obvious as a career path. It may be, growth on a personal level, to be a more confident person, to be, improve their communication skills. There can be a wide range of reasons. University is not just, going to university, undertaking the course and getting your qualification. There's a whole experience involved in going to university, potentially moving away from home, the life skills that they learn, communication skills that they learn, and all of that packaged up comes under a kind of the idea of employability skills and what makes them a more employable person once they've graduated from university. So some top tips then that we always give to students when we deliver any kind of personal statement writing sessions. So we do always recommend that students brainstorm their ideas. So sit down and really think about things that they could potentially include, how things might fit together. We always recommend that they produce several drafts. you know, write it out. Chances are the first time they write it, it will be much too long. Certainly when I was doing mine, I did many drafts and the first one was about 3 times too long. So it does definitely help to just get it all down on paper, and then you can edit it carefully. We always suggest for students to aim for around 4 to 5 paragraphs. Obviously this can differ, but in terms of structuring, we try and encourage sort of 4 to 5 paragraphs. So it sometimes helps helpful for students to think about in their planning paragraph by paragraph what they can put in each paragraph. We always encourage them to ask for people's feedback, so whether that's teachers at school, careers advisors at school, friends, family, get other people to read it, you know, check it makes sense. Do you think I'm being clear, concise? Am I getting my point across? All those kinds of things. So definitely getting feedback from others is something we really stress. Of course, be enthusiastic. You know, the person reading the personal statement at the university wants to be under the impression that they, you know, really want to study that course, really want to come to that university, are really passionate and interested in the subject they're looking to study, and you can really get that across in the way that the personal statement is written. Of course, a very key one, and we can never stress this one enough, is to check very carefully the spelling and grammar mistakes. Of course, the personal statements will be read and considered by academics at the university, and they will not miss a beat in terms of poor spelling and grammar. And I always say don't ever trust Microsoft Word spell check. It isn't foolproof. So yeah, we do always stress to make sure you check it very carefully, and as well to make sure that everything is relevant. So you're not going off in any kind of tangent, just to fill out the words in your personal statement. Everything is super relevant for the personal statement and for the course and the university that they're applying to. So some don'ts then, some things we generally don't recommend is to use fancy language that the students perhaps wouldn't ordinarily use if they think it's going to make them sound particularly more clever. We always say, you know, try and keep it as clear and concise instead of trying to make it sound clever. Of course, for them to never lie in the personal statement. This can be found out, especially if they have to go to interview, for example, and they get asked about anything included in their personal statement. So absolutely never lie. Try to avoid using humour. I know quite often students think, oh, it will make them stand out to a selector, but obviously you don't know what the selector's humour is going to be like, and what you might find funny they may not find funny, and it may work not in your favour. Similarly, don't copy or plagiarise. I know quite a lot of students are tempted to have a little Google and check and see, you know, what's a good example personal statement, and take some from phrasing and some sentences from there, and that will get picked up as well. We definitely recommend not to leave it to the last minute, and not to write it directly into the online text box in the application form. So we always recommend you draft it out in Word, have it all ready to go, so you're copying and pasting it into the UCAS application, and never just panically at the last minute typing it straight into the application. It's never the best way to do it. So a couple of resources in the next few slides, which I will share, that can be forwarded on to students and parents after this if they would like them. But you can see here a table with a suggested kind of structure for how you might plan, how they might structure out the personal statement. So as I said at the beginning, what the course is, how they became interested in the course, are there any aspects of your current course that's lead you to choose that particular university course, so why they applied, are there any particular subjects within that topic, or any topics within that subject that you are particularly interested in, and what do you already know about the subject, or what do you hope to find out at university level, and then looking at your personal qualities, and how your personal qualities suit you to that particular area of study, and then moving on to any relevant experience that they might have, work experience, part-time work, that kind of thing, and then also your future career plan. So that's kind of one way of structuring it and looking at it, and I'm very aware I'm going through this very quickly, but I'm very conscious of time. Another one, which was very helpful for students as well, to get them to think about their skills. So we, as a list of example skills here, which of course is not an exhaustive list, but get them to think about how things that they do, whether in their studies or in their spare time, that they do to demonstrate those skills. and why that skill would then be useful at university. So you can see on there we've got confidence, organisational skills, teamwork, time management, all of these things that are important for university life. So again, this is a resource that I can share afterwards. And the final resource I've got is thinking about personal achievements and kind of helping them think about their hobbies and interests. So there's a couple of examples on here. So for example, a position of responsibility. So if they're a prefect at school or a head boy or a head girl, a sense of responsibility, so being trusted to act as a role model for other students. So that is the kind of quality that they can get from that particular role. If they've got a hobby and interest, so the example on there is drama. And so what does it involve? Being involved in a drama club outside of school. But what importantly has the student gained from this? And that's confidence while performing and commitment to regular rehearsal. So it's pulling out the skills and kind of experiences from the hobbies and interests. So again, this is a resource that I can share. Just moving on quickly, last couple of slides are about after applying. So once the students have sent off their university application, kind of what happens next. So usually in terms of decisions from universities, there will usually be 3 or 4 outcomes here. Most commonly will be a conditional offer, and this means that the university is prepared to offer the student a place, assuming that they meet certain requirements. Now this will usually be exam results or grades. So for example, A-level BBC with a C in biology, or IB with a total of 34 points and level 5 in history, just off the top of my head as examples. And then once they meet those conditional offers, then their place will be confirmed. An unconditional offer will mean the students already met the requirements, and so their place will already be confirmed at that point. They're not waiting on exam results for their place. And of course, the less positive outcomes will be unsuccessful or withdrawn. So unsuccessful would be if the university is not prepared to offer the student a place, and they'll usually give the reason as to why. And they can also be withdrawn. Now, obviously, a student can withdraw their own application. Similarly, a university can withdraw a student's application from their end as well. And that would only usually be if they've been trying to get in contact with the student and they've not been getting back to them, or they've been invited to an interview and they didn't attend and hadn't had any communication. So those are the outcomes that you would usually get. And then once you have those outcomes, the students then have the option to kind of respond to those outcomes. So this will be they'll get to choose a firm and insurance choice, or a first and backup choice. So a firm choice would be their preferred place to go and study at. So if they were, fortunate that they received offers from all 5 of their universities or 5 courses, then they will have 5 to choose from, and they can choose the one that they would like to go to. And if they meet those conditions, as I said previously, and they're their firm choice, as soon as they've got their results, their place at university will be confirmed. We also have an insurance choice, or what we describe as a backup choice, and this we generally tend to advise that students pick a course or a university with a slightly lower entry requirement, so that obviously if they don't meet the requirements for their firm choice, they are then likely to potentially meet the requirements for their insurance choice instead. And then likewise, if they don't meet their firm but do meet their insurance, then they will get their place confirmed at their insurance choice as well. Now, should a student be in a situation where they haven't managed to get into either their firm or insurance choice, there is also clearing, and this happens on results day and thereafter. And this is the student's final opportunity to find their place at university. So it's not the end of the line. If they don't get into their firm or insurance choice, they can go into clearing and reach out to other universities that they may be interested in, or perhaps hadn't considered in the first application process, and find out if they could potentially secure a place at that institution instead. And for that, we generally encourage them to pick up the phone and speak to universities on results day and find out what their options are. Students can often be offered university places over the phone. So we do encourage students, when you get to that, if they get to that situation, to ring up and speak to us. And of course, students do have the option as well to put themselves into clearing. So if they change their mind on their firm or insurance choice, and they decide they want to apply somewhere else instead, then students can also put themselves into clearing as well. I know I've whistled through that very quickly. I'm very conscious of time, just to note that for any parents of students that may be interested in Essex, we do have a parents webinar series that offers support through the process as well. But I will take any questions now if there is any. I will stop sharing screen.
Thank you, Emily. Yes, we do have a few questions. If you look in your Q&A in the published column, a couple of interesting questions about what you should include in your statement around dyslexia, or if a student has an EHC plan. Can you see them?
I can't at the moment. One moment.
I can read them out if not. I don't want to.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, if you want to just read that one again. So
yeah, the first one is if you're dyslexic, should you mention it in the statement? Personal statement.
It's entirely up to you. It's not a requirement to include it in your personal statement. But if a student feels that it's something that they've worked hard to overcome, or they have certain experiences around having dyslexia that they think will benefit their university application, then by all means you can include it. But there's no obligation for students to include it if they have it in their personal statement. Universities will always offer support for students with any kind of learning disability once you're there anyway. But yeah, it does not impact your application in that way.
Yeah, that's what I thought from my perspective, because I've worked in HE and read a lot of statements, and yeah, that's if it's something you've overcome. The other question was quite specific about a student if they've got an educational healthcare plan. Should it be included there, or is there somewhere else that they would include that in an application? And I'm not 100% sure, so I'm going to go away and find that out. I don't know if you know, but
was it a health plan? Sorry,
educational healthcare plan.
Educational healthcare plan.
For example.
I mean, my advice would be that it wouldn't be something I think you would necessarily need to include in the personal statement. I mean, obviously, in terms of space on the personal statement, you're quite limited anyway. But yeah, I think that, again, that's something I would, in terms of where else it would go on the application. On top of my head, I couldn't tell you for sure. But again, I'm more than happy to look into that and follow that up afterwards.
Yeah, I think the emphasis on, writing about what's important to you, and there will always be an opportunity to let your intended university know about any needs, because they'll be reaching out to support you anyway. So I'll make sure I will find out specifically about that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there'll be ample opportunity once your place is secured to kind of get in contact about any disability or anything that impacts your studies, and universities will have plenty of support out there for you.
Okay. Here is, so a couple of questions around offers and clearing, actually. So this one's a question about courses that require an audition, so something like musical theatre. How does the offers process and then the clearing process work for courses that are audition dependent?
Yeah, so I mean, generally speaking, we have acting courses at Essex, and obviously I know that they are very audition dependent. One thing I will say from our experience, and obviously I can't speak for all universities and all courses, is that for those types of courses, it is often very rare they go to clearing, for the reason that they're usually in high demand. But I would imagine if there are courses that do go into clearing, that there may still be an audition process as part of the kind of the application as well. But yeah, again, I would be surprised. It would usually be quite a quick turnaround. So, for example, if you are in clearing and you will be offered a place, it may be that they require an audition, in which case that would probably happen fairly soon after clearing. So it would be probably quite.
I've worked in universities where those places are available in clearing for both audition-based courses or portfolio-based creative courses, and in clearing we have a quick turnaround, and we want to either see a portfolio or meet you, just because it's often useful for students to have that opportunity to perform or to talk about their work. So we find it's actually quite useful. So that is managed in that process. So clearing is certainly open to students in those subjects. Couple more questions. Can you talk about trips that you went to during school things like you did for achievement or volunteering?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so those are things I was speaking about in terms of like extracurricular activities around your current studies. So anything that you've done, certainly in subject areas that you're then planning to apply for courses in, anything that you did outside of it. definitely include that and explain why it's relevant, why it's, you know, giving you a passion for the subject, or what skill you've gained from doing it. So yeah, definitely encourage you to incorporate as much of that as you can.
You've got one more question here, and actually it's one that I don't know the answer to, but I should do, is can you apply to one of your original 5 choices through clearing that you hadn't accepted as either your firm or insurance choice?
Yes, is the answer to that question. Yeah, so if so obviously you apply to 5, you have to then pick a firm and insurance, and obviously, you know, so those other 3 in theory are kind of gone. So yeah, it would be a process of reapplying. So you still have to pick up the phone, speak to them, give them your UCAS number, so they can get all your details. But yeah, absolutely, if you want to pick one of the, you know, 3rd, 4th or 5th place in your list of preferences, and absolutely yes, you can do that.
Yeah. They won't hold it against you forever.
Absolutely not. No, I'm sure they would love to hear from you.
That's brilliant. I think we've come to the end of our questions, and it's time to hand over to our next speaker. So thank you very much, Emily. That was really informative. And we'll make sure that we circulate her guidance and her PowerPoint, because there was some really useful information there, and certainly from my experience reading those statements, the admissions tutor or a course leader really wants to see a sense of that person, kind of an authentic themselves. So I think it was really, really good advice. Anyway, moving on, I'm really delighted now to welcome Beth Howe, who is a college engagement officer from Anglia Ruskin University, so our local university, and she's going to talk about that hot topic, student finance. So welcome, Beth. I'm going to hand over to you now.
Beth, you're live now. Just so you know that your slideshow is showing rather than the actual presentation. Could you try using the show button down the bottom right corner? There, perfect. All yours.
Hi, Andy. Sorry, could you just confirm that you could hear me? Okay.
Yes, we can hear you. Everything's fine. You're good to go.
Lovely. Thank you very much. Sorry about that. My computer just decided to freeze at the complete wrong time. But no, thank you for the introduction, Harriet, and good evening, everyone. And thank you for joining. I hope you found out some really, really useful information so far. As Harriet mentioned, my name is Beth and I am from Anglia Ruskin University. I'm here, I'm from the Schools and College Engagement team to start with, so I offer information, advice and guidance to students in schools and colleges, just like Long Road, to help them make better informed decisions. This session is going to be about student finance. So if I quickly move on, the things that I want to cover, because there can be quite a lot of confusion around student finance in particular, it's broken down into 2 loans. So that's a tuition fee loan and the maintenance loan. I'm also going to cover applying for student finance, additional support, and the bit that everyone cares the most about, which is the repayments process as well. Just so you're aware, I'm not a financial advisor, unfortunately, so we do rely on the facts and figures for all of this information. So if you do require any other information afterwards, I'll happily pass on your questions to our money advice team at the university. So to begin with, the tuition fee loan is something which everybody here today, or your young people, should be eligible for to be able to go to university. And in short, it basically pays for their course. So the maximum that any university can charge for a tuition fee for the years 2021 and 2022 will be £9,250 per year. Okay, this number has been frozen since 2017. You might see some slightly different figures on various different university websites. It can go down to 7,750, depending on whether or not they want to do a foundation degree and other things like that. But that kind of standard really is 9,250. So what does this pay for? I'm going to use ARU here as an example. So for example, we have our library service, which is 24 hours in term time. huge range of books, resources, a digital library, laptops, study spaces, things like that. Facilities as well, so depending on what university they decide to go to, we have things like skills labs, our Mumford Theatre, School of Medicine, engineering rooms, mock law courts, and all those other fantastic facilities at university. The money also goes towards lecturers and university staff, so they're not only going to be the people who are teaching your students, they do also contribute to new and exciting research as well. And many students will need specialist equipment, so things like 3D printers, music studios, paramedic science equipment. The list can go on and on, but these are the types of things that £9,250 a year does pay for. Finally, I've put student services on there as well because it is a lot of extra support which some people aren't always sure that they get at university. So I've mentioned our money advice team. A lot of universities also have a free counselling service, careers and employability teams as well, and study support. So that is your tuition fee loan. So with this, students are not required to pay any money up front. Okay, getting this loan is also not linked to household income, so there's no means testing involved. And all students, depending on their eligibility, can get this loan to pay for their course. It will only cover the cost of their course, which I think is really important to note. So if a tuition fee was £7,750, the student wouldn't get the £9,000 and keep the rest. Okay, it's purely how much the course will cost. It's also good to know that the student will never actually see that money, so there is no temptation to go out and spend it before they start their course. When they do actually start, the university will inform student finance and the money then gets released directly to the university. So it won't actually touch their bank account at all. And also it's just worth noting, it doesn't just appear automatically, they do have to apply, which I'll touch more on later on. That is the tuition fee loan in a nutshell. It's quite easy to describe that one. The maintenance loan is a little bit more complicated. This is a loan to cover the student's living expenses, and it is means tested. Okay, so it does mean that it's worked out depending on the household income of a lot of you that are here today joining this meeting. One second, sorry, my laptop's going very slow. It's also overheating. Let me go back. Sorry, Andy, 2 seconds.
You're not alone, Beth. Lots of people are struggling today. Okay. I don't think it's going to allow me to go backwards. Yes, it is. Okay, there we go. Apologies. So the household income is worked out by the salary or the income of the adults in the house, basically. So this could mean a lone parent, a carer, a parent and a carer and their partner, both parents, etc., etc. If parents or guardians have separated, it is the household that the student resides in for the majority of the time. If it is a 50-50 custody / share, this should be worked out by the individual and their circumstances. Okay, so if this does apply to your student, it's worth getting in touch with student finance when they apply, just to explain your situation and to figure out the best kind of route forward, if you like. The loan is also paid in 3 instalments, and these usually fit in around term times. Okay, so, and it also fits in with the time when they have to pay for their accommodation. Okay, so it does link up quite nicely, and it also means that they don't get their full loan in their bank at the start of the year and get to go out and spend it all. It is paid in instalments. And finally, they will still receive a maintenance loan whether they are living at home or away at university. So if you can see on the screen now, the maximum loan that they will get if they were living at home is £7,987 per year, and living away from home is £9,488. Okay, hopefully this should work this time. Okay, so when I talk about living costs, there are lots of different things that a student would want to consider. The first thing being accommodation. So the cost can vary a lot depending on where they want to live and also what types of accommodation they're looking for. For example, an ensuite or a shared, etc., etc. So it's definitely worth researching into this beforehand. This also should cover food. So the average student budget will be around £30 per week on food, depending on how much they like to eat out, etc. They will need to be aware of what bills might come in, how much they are and when they'll get them. Clothing and toiletries, obviously they need to be thinking about what's essential and what's not. They probably can afford designer trainers at the start of the year when their loan drops into their bank account, but would it last them 10 weeks time? Probably not. Okay. Travel, this one is really important, especially, well, both if you're commuting and if you're living away from home. They need to make sure they can get to campus and or get home when they want to as well. Socialising, I don't need to touch on that too much, it's quite self-explanatory. Obviously cleaning products, TV licence, mobile phone contract, things like that are all going to be things that students need to consider really when they get their loan. Okay, so this is a rough estimation of how much it would cost per year for a student to be at university. This wasn't created by ARU. This is what it was. Came out as an advisory by the government. I believe it was a few years ago. So to explain the table in a little bit more detail, this is assuming that each student would live comfortably on a budget of £9,488 per year. So every student has the same budget, and that's on the right hand side of the table. The left hand side of the table, we have the household income, and the amount of loan that they would get per year is in blue. So if the household income is £25,000, they would receive the full loan, and they probably wouldn't need to make up any extra money themselves because they'd be covered. If you go down to say 45 grand a year, they've received approximately 6,771, which means there is an excess of £2,717 to basically make up. And then as you get further down, obviously, as soon as you go above £62,000, they will be receiving the minimum loan, and then the contribution per year, which is expected to be made by either household or themselves, will be larger. Okay, I personally really like this table because I think it's a really good demonstration, although I don't want it to kind of scare people off. It's not a case of parents, you need to make up this amount of money exactly. It also comes down to students potentially getting part-time jobs at university, and also all the different additional support that they might be eligible for as well, which I will come on to later. Just to use myself as an example, actually, I was very lucky. I did receive some help from my parents throughout my time there, but I also worked 2 part-time jobs, and I found that quite manageable alongside my studies as well. So it is doable, but hopefully this just gives you a bit of an example as to how much roughly they'd receive and how much they'd need as well. Okay, so when it comes to applying, applications are now open for this year and for January starters in 2022. And it will be about the same time for next year. So they open up in February and they will close around about May time. It is best to apply early, as applications can take about 8 weeks to process. Okay, so the deadline to that May deadline is basically to ensure they get their money before the start of their course. To fill out the form, students need passport, bank account details and national insurance number. There is alternatives they can use, and they are all listed on the Student Finance England website. It's about a 30-minute process, so it shouldn't take too long, and they will need to put the university that is their first choice. Okay,
I appreciate in February though they might still be unsure, so that this can actually be changed at a later date if needs be, but they will need to put down their first choice originally. The second part is what parents and carers will fill out, so that'll be yourselves, and you will need your national insurance number and your income details based on the last P60 that you have. Again, if you don't have one, there are alternatives on the website as well. And finally, you do have to put on information about any other dependents, and the good thing about this is if there are any other siblings, it's £1,130 off the household income for each sibling in the family as well. And the last thing I will cover on this part is if your student is unsure on a university, I would really recommend them still to apply. Okay. They can even accept a place on a course and no money will be released until they enrol on that course. So it's very easy to cancel student finance rather than to apply late. Okay, so it's a very straightforward process and we do make it easy for them. If they want to cancel, they can, and we'd much rather they do that than get their money later on during the year. Okay, so before I touch on repayments, I did want to make you all aware of additional support. I'm not going to go into too much detail because I'm quite wary of time, and I also don't want to confuse things because these are very different for each university that your young people might be applying for. But there are lots and lots of different types of support available depending on students' circumstances. So I would strongly recommend looking into chosen universities' websites. They should all have a page very similar to this, and it will have a detailed explanation of what each one is. Just to give you an example on here, any student studying an NHS course receives an extra £5,000 grant. Okay, that is you don't have to pay that back as well. So it will make a massive difference to a student's finances if they are made aware of additional support that could be available to them. But like I said, it does depend on eligibility and circumstances as well. So if you're interested in ARU, I'd really recommend, especially for this, that you get in touch with the money advice team, because we'd be more than happy to help and advise on what different type of support is there for them. Okay. So repaying the loan. So there's quite a lot of stigma around this, I think. A lot of people make the assumption that you're going to be in debt for the rest of your life, you're never going to pay it off, and it all can sound very negative. That's not necessarily the case at all. So students will only start making repayments in the April after they graduate, and that is only if they are earning over £27,295 per year. Okay, and they will only pay back 9% on that. Yeah, and what you pay back is dependent on what you earn and not what you owe. Okay, so I will show you some examples of this on the next slide. And as an example just now, actually, if you were to earn £27,800 per year, you would pay back roughly £9.18 per month. Okay, so it's really not a significant amount. It does also reflect your earnings. So if you were to take a career break or get made redundant, the payments would reflect the change or the drop in salary. I took a career break to go travelling a couple of years ago, and from the date that I left my previous job, I didn't pay anything back on my student loan until I got a new job when I returned to the UK. And then from that point, I'd paid back based on that salary that I earned when I came back. So there wasn't kind of any backlog or anything like that. And regardless of how much you pay back, the loan is cleared after 30 years from graduation. So technically, if a student was to earn £27,200 per year for the rest of their life, they would actually never pay a penny back at all. The final thing I would say, and it's like I said at the beginning, all of these figures are representative of right here, right now. They are subject to change. We are constantly looking at the government website, just making sure that everything is as up to date as possible. So just be aware that they might change slightly when your student decides to go to university, if that's, you know, next year or the year after. Okay. So just finally, there is some repayment examples here. We usually show these to young people in schools and colleges that we work with, because I personally think it gives a really nice example of how much they'd pay back. So as you can see on the screen, Anisha earns 35 grand a year. Her income before tax is 2,916 per month. Her student loan repayment is £57.78. Okay. And just in comparison at the bottom, you can see Emma's annual salary, her income, and obviously, like I said before, her student loan repayment will be 0 because she earns underneath the threshold. So I believe that is it. I appreciate I've just thrown a lot of information out there very, very quickly. I was just quite conscious of time to make sure that I get through everything all in all. If you do have questions, please pop them in the chat box now, and I'll bring them up on my screen in just a second and hopefully answer them for you. But as I've touched on throughout, please make sure that you're having a look with your student into student finance and kind of reflecting on the things that I've discussed today about various different budgeting tips, but also the process of how to apply, because the more that they can understand it, the easier it is when they actually come around to do it.
Thanks, Beth. Just whilst you're having a look at your published questions, I just thought I would so there are some really interesting comments from parents that I just would recommend, obviously from parents that have been through the process already. And there's a recommendation for Martin Lewis's Money Saving Expert site and information about the advantages, if any, of paying for your child to go to uni rather than taking on student finance. So that's one recommendation. Another recommendation for a website called savethestudent.org, which I haven't heard of before, but the links there are in the questions. And then there are a number of different questions that I put under the published section. Can you see them?
Yeah, I'm just
trying to filter them out so they're easy for you to see. But there's one question that I thought was useful, whether the household income is calculated on gross or net salary.
That is a really good question. I'm not actually entirely sure on the answer. What I would recommend, I will go away and have a look for the answer and then let Harriet and Andy know so they can potentially let you know. But what I would recommend as well is to have a look at the student finance website, and they do have lots of information on there. And I think to find the answer to something like that would require, it's kind of the nitty gritty parts of it, if you like.
Yeah,
so
there are a lot of nitty gritty questions for another one around which financial year would they make the calculation on. Again, but I think they're quite specific questions that we would need to kind of look into more detail about. I think one question there, which is the one I was thinking, is there, what about if you have a sandwich year or a year abroad or something? Do you get extra grant, or
it would depend
is that
on the
unfunded?
Yeah, so it would depend on the university that they go to and how they work the sandwich year. So whether it's a placement year or they decide to take a year out and continue their studies. You can take a break in student finance and then receive your loan when you get back for your final year. I'm just not quite sure on the actual funding for that sandwich year and on what that kind of falls under. I think for that type of question, it'd be best to speak to the university that they're choosing to go to, because it'll be quite specific to the course as well. I can see another question there about the repayment. Yes, the repayment is for both the tuition fee loan and the maintenance loan together, so it is combined. But when it comes to repayments, students will receive a letter, if they still do that now. I'm not sure if we've gone completely digital, with the kind of total amount that they owe, and they do also have a Student Finance England account which will show all of their repayments on there, and you can actually opt in to pay more of it off if you wanted to, or you can just kind of leave it there, but it does allow you to track and see how much you're paying back each month as well.
I think we've got time for one last question. Can you recap what the interest rate on the student loan is? I think you did mention it earlier, but
yeah, it's 9%. I don't think my presentation is up anymore.
So I think we've answered all the questions, and I'll make sure that we save those kind of recommendations and advice from parents. Might be a couple, and we'll make sure that we address any of the others that haven't been answered, because I know there are a few more filtering in now, particularly about some of those specific needs. But I know it's time to hand over now to our final talk of the evening. So thanks very much, Beth. That was really useful. Such an important topic, and it's quite a confusing area to navigate and kind of understand the implications of it. So now I will hand over to Andy Goodwin, who is our Head of Progression at Long Road. Might be freezing there for a minute.
There we are. No, hello. Hi.
Sorry, it was freezing there a minute, but anyway, you popped up, so I will hand over now. Thanks, Andy.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much to Beth and all the other speakers, and Harriet. Thank you for putting me on. So, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining me. And this is the last talk of the night. And I have to say, I've been really impressed with some of the things that we've been hearing today. And you might find that I refer to some of the content that's been covered as well. I don't think that's a bad thing. I think it's good for you to sometimes have repetition, because it helps you to make the appropriate notes. One thing I would say is, if you haven't already, if you could grab yourself a pen and paper, that will probably be quite useful. The content I'm going to be looking at, you can see the heading there is strengthening student portfolios beyond their qualifications. And part of that will be making reference to a range of people and activities that you might want to make notes of as I go through my talk. So the first thing I'm going to say then is there is no escaping it. We cannot escape it. I've said it. COVID restrictions have impacted our students, but we do remain committed to their success. We see this all the time. We hear about it all the time, but I thought it might be useful to maybe just dig a little bit deeper than just common talk in the pub, or well, maybe not in the pub garden, and just look at what some of the research is saying. It's quite interesting, really. The Sutton Trust, for example, and London School of Economics are both talking about analysis that they did last year. Following the COVID-19 restrictions, it's talking about a negative impact on, in particular, social mobility, and particularly for disadvantaged groups. Okay, and so, yes, all of our students do not belong to disadvantaged groups, but the social mobility point is a really interesting one to think about. It's taken up further by the Commission on Race and Ethnic Disparities, and we can see a report they've produced here in 21. And looking at two groups in particular there, we've got Black Afro-Caribbean groups and also white British young people from low socio-economic groups. They are both the least optimistic about both social mobility and the power that education has to transform their lives. Now, personally, I feel it's a tragedy if people can't believe in the education and where it can take them. And what I'm hoping by the end of this talk tonight, you will have some information that you can use to talk to your son or daughter to perhaps spur them on a little bit more. Before I do that, I wanted to just quickly look at a few statistics, really. I'm trying not to overload you with too much, but I wanted to begin with the national job market. And this is just to kind of get a sense of where we are at then, if all of this social mobility and negative feelings are going out there. how does the job market look? So on a national level, this is some information that was produced by LinkedIn for the first quarter of this year. And you see there nationally, these are the top areas of jobs that are coming up. And it is a positive thing. We do have jobs coming up on a national level. I've heard some of the other speakers tonight talk about, popular jobs. And for example, it's no surprise there that software and IT are at the top. And, I think everybody has to some extent been touched by the digital revolution that we've gone through in the last 18 months or so. Now, I'm not trying to say that these 10 jobs cover all of our students, but it does spark a thought in my mind. And I'd like you to maybe pass this on to sons and daughters, and that is that it's time to start researching. As we're coming to the end of year one, it's time to start researching into industries and the business world in general to see what kind of opportunities are out there, even if they've decided they want to go to university. Because there's no point going to university if you don't know where you're going to go in the long run. It's much easier if you know what that final goal is and looking at courses that might help you achieve that goal. But of course, this is the national picture. So the next thought that went through my mind is, well, can we bring it down to a more local level? And what I found was this. It's from the Regional Labour Force Survey. It's a summary by the Office of National Statistics. And this is for February to April 21. In fact, this is the results from yesterday. That's how fresh it is. And what I did was I looked at all of the statistics associated with people over the age of 16. And we can see here that by the way, these numbers are in thousands. So it's not just saying that the total over 16 is 5,036. We're not far off having that number in our college alone. No, that's in thousands. So that's 5,036,000. OK. And you can see that those who are economically active over the age of 16 is 81.1%. So quite a high economically active figure there. Economically active means that they are able to work and or looking for work. Now, of those in employment, 77.8%, so over 3/4, and those unemployed, 3.9%. So that's 124,000 people in the east of England who are not working, they're unemployed. There's also 1,820,000 who are economically inactive. So that means they're not actively looking for work. Now, I just want to point one thing out here, or two combined, really. If you look at those in employment and look at this final column about the change per quarter. So this is what's happened in the last quarter. We've had a 0.4% positive 0.4% increase in the number of people in jobs, in employment. Now, 0.4% of 1,000 people would be 4 people. Of 3,000 people, it would be 12 people. But of 3 million people, we're talking about 12,000 people. Okay, and when you look at the numbers who are unemployed, it's minus 4.4. So it's dropped by minus 4.4%. And that there is around the 6,500 figure. So combined, we're looking at a shift of about 18,000 in total. And that's just in the last quarter. And that reflects the kind of positive development of new opportunities that we are seeing in the local area. Now, I'm going to try and go even closer. Apologies for those who don't live in Cambridgeshire, but I did manage to get some statistics on the Cambridgeshire region. Apologies if this is very small, but down the left-hand side here, we've got Cambridgeshire, East Cambridgeshire, Fenland, Huntingdonshire, and South Cambridgeshire. Now, I'd just like to point a few things out, and this is the first one. Huntingdonshire has the highest number of employed people over the age of 16 in Cambridgeshire. Okay, Huntingdonshire has the highest number in employment. Okay, and this is the figure here, 88,000 people. And it's followed by South Cambs there of 78,000. So in terms of the number of people who are employed, that's the area where the highest numbers are. Cambridge as a city has the highest unemployment rate. Okay, so the highest unemployment rate of 4.1%, for 16-year-olds, or people over the age of 16. This is the 4.1% figure there. And that's followed by South Cambridgeshire, which is 3.4%. Excuse me, sorry, it's the highest claimant count as well of 0.9%. Okay, so Huntingdonshire has the highest number over 16 in employment. Cambridge has the highest unemployment rate of that same age group. However, Cambridgeshire has by far the highest number of jobs per resident. They call it vacancy density of 1.41 jobs. That means for every resident in Cambridge, there have been 1.41 job vacancies in the last year. And that's followed by South Cambridgeshire of 1.03. The other regions, it's much lower. So while South Cambridgeshire has the highest earnings per resident of £720 per week, we see that it is followed by Cambridge on £668 per week. So there's a switch round there. Cambridge has the highest number of jobs per resident, but its salaries are lower per head than South Cambridgeshire. So some interesting facts. And for me, that makes some questions in my mind about young people. If they're thinking about where they'd like to find jobs, if they live in Cambridge, are they prepared to commute to Huntingdonshire? If they do go to Huntingdonshire and get a job, or if people live in that region and get jobs, are they going to be satisfied with that in terms of pay, or are they going to want to go to look at Cambridge itself to see if they can get a higher salary, or South Cambridge even? So some interesting thoughts. So I would say if we've got this positive movement in terms of jobs coming back to the region, I would say it's time to look forward. I want our students to start thinking about what they can achieve in the future. And I hope you have gathered this evening from the talks that we are committed to help our students achieve their full potential. You've heard about the staff support in college from both Tim and Neve and Harriet as well, but I'm going to go through that in a little bit more detail in a moment. For now, though, I just want to quickly emphasize this next question, and that is, how can students help themselves? So I've mentioned they may need to think about the areas that they want to work in. They may want to think about the potential wages that they'd like to earn. And that might have an influencing factor on ideas about what they apply for in the future, if it's, for example, an apprenticeship, or ideas that they might have in the future, no matter where they're going. Sometimes it's a playoff between location and job and the salary that they're earning. In addition to that, though, I'm going to follow on from Harriet's theme earlier on, the assistant principal, and that was we would like to relate to you here. And what I would also ask is that you can do the following. We want you to encourage students to recognise that, yes, when they're here, qualifications without a doubt are very, very important. However, it is not the only thing, not the only asset that they take away from this college. I would suggest that qualifications plus additional activities give an increased chance of success. So good results at qualifications, great. And hopefully that's going to make them successful. However, if you've got additional activities on top, it's going to make them that bit more dynamic. And I think we've heard a lot of that from the universities and from Harriet Dodsworth talking about apprenticeships as well. So what do I mean by additional activities? Well, I think the first one to look at is work experience. And a lot of our students do work experience as part of their course. However, not everybody does. And because not all of our students do work experience, I want to say quite emphatically that we hope that more will start to think about this. We would encourage you to encourage your sons and daughters to take on work experience. Now, in this last year, I'll be honest, it's almost come to a standstill in terms of physical work experience, and that's because of the COVID restrictions. Some companies closing down, some companies have got most of their staff at home, and that's made that very difficult. However, what we've also seen is this rise in virtual work experience. And I think, yeah, maybe there's some Zoom fatigue or online fatigue for some of our students. However, I hope, and I would impress upon you, that they don't see virtual work experience as a lesser opportunity. It is, yes, the best that can be done at any one moment in time, but actually it also offers sometimes opportunities that weren't previously available for physical work experience. Take, for example, an opportunity comes up in Glasgow. If it's a virtual work experience, then one of our students could easily access that much more easily than if they were going to try and do that physically. So, based in the LRC, the Learning Resource Centre, or the library, whichever your son or daughter calls it, is the progression team. Amongst them is myself. And we can offer guidance and support to our students to help them to identify potential contacts for work experience, shown as WEX, W-E-X there. So all they need to do is come down to the LRC and ask for us, and we will do our best to help them. We also have some materials on Moodle, and I will show you those before the end of this talk. But why is work experience so important? What does research show us? Again, I want you to realize that this isn't just my opinion. This is what's being talked about out there. Well, it's so important and so highly rated now that it's embedded not just in secondary school, but also sixth form and also universities. Okay, across all the institutional levels and all those ages, work experience is being seen as a really, really important thing to do. And to a large extent, it's to help our young people develop the skills and insights into industry when they are there. Now, what's interesting is if you think about, imagine at the start of the COVID restrictions, if we had students that were work experience had been sorted out and then suddenly it got taken away from them in that last year of restrictions, what impact does that have? Well, there's some research that you can see on screen there by HEPI, and what they showed was that if work experience was taken away from students, then there was a decline in the success of those students finding roles or accessing roles into the kind of jobs that they aspired to. So taking that away, suddenly they weren't as successful getting what they wanted. Flip that round and we look at another piece of research. This is by the Edge Foundation, and what they have found is that work experience and the development of employability skills are strong drivers for career success. It is absolutely a positive thing that they're talking about, and that research, it doesn't say there that research came out just this year in 2021. As if to emphasize that, I would ask you to just think back to what we've been listening to from the universities in particular, but also from Harriet talking about apprenticeships. Everybody is talking about the importance of employability skills. So what can students do then to develop those skills? This is where your pen and paper are going to come in handy. Paul Andrew is course team leader here in biology. His email address is up there on screen. And as you heard from Tim earlier on, he runs a med squad for students interested in medicine, veterinary and dental careers. And yes, they do activities all of the time. They've had fantastic speakers coming in this week during Progression Week, and all of the students in the med squad and beyond have been able to access those talks. If your son or daughter is in the med squad, then please encourage them to look at what talks remain this week. I've also put on there that in normal years, shall we say, when we haven't got restrictions, we also try and arrange MMIs. That stands for multiple miniature interviews. And these are typical for students who go for one of these job areas at university. Sorry, they go to study at university. When they turn up for their interview, part of that day is a room that they walk into, and there may be 5 or 6 stations with individual experts at them. And they are given something like 5 minutes per station, and then the bell rings. It's a bit like hot desking, and then they move around to the next desk, etc. And they are not told in advance what they're going to be asked. So they are then asked very pertinent questions about the discipline it is that they want to study. And they will be judged and scored upon their performance in terms of the way they answer. And all of those scores are pulled together, and that goes towards a contribution towards whether they are offered an opportunity in that med school, veterinary school, dentistry school. So what we do is we use some of the expertise we've got here in college, but we also bring in experts, for example, from the University of Cambridge, and we set each other up on desks, and we will do a mock version of MMIs. Fantastic, the results. Our students are fairly scared about it because it's a nerve-wracking thing, but without exception, they talk about how it improves their performance when they actually go for interviews in the real world, because they've had an experience of it, and it helps them to feel less nervous. Now, it's not just the high end where we've got medicine students, for example, who are looking to develop employability skills. Okay, I would also suggest that something as simple as joining a sports team helps to develop skills such as team skills, dealing with pressure, working with others, using initiative, finding creativity to develop your skills in a new way that hadn't been thought of before. So if someone is interested in that, they can just go to our sports block and speak to reception about the sports teams that we have. In addition to that, we have a really wide range of enrichment societies and clubs here at the college. Some of them are listed there, the Feminist Society, Pride Club, Black People Society, even religious groups like, for example, a Christian Union. Okay, our progress coaches can advise students on which of these groups are available to be joined. There's no cost, it's all free, it's volunteer situation. However, you might wonder, well, what's that got to do with employability skills? I would argue that what that does is it gives an opportunity to find out about different perspectives in the world, and what influences people's decisions about what they want to do. Now, in addition to that, we've got Sam Plant, who's our volunteer coordinator, his email address there. He is constantly putting opportunities out for students who are interested in volunteering. It's a great way of getting into people's lives and the world of work and developing skills. And we've got some more here. Russell Group Universities, those who are interested in that, Tim mentioned it earlier on as head of studies. You can contact him directly and he will tell you what support is available there. We also have roles for student ambassadors who represent the college on our special events, and we have peer mentoring as well, where students can offer one-to-one support or sometimes group support for new students when they start here in the college. It's great for developing communication skills, and it is a real role of responsibility. So to have your son or daughter get involved in that, they should just speak to Dawn or Julie in the Student Centre. They're our student support team, and they can tell them what's available. If a student is interested in entrepreneurship, they can come and see me in the LRC, and I can tell them about any support that we can give them. And Sam Grace does our DOV, our Duke of Edinburgh Award, talk about put something back into the community, you know, or developing resilience, teamwork, all of those things. He's there for our students, and he's had fantastic success getting students through those awards. One of those things that's often knocked is the amount of time students spend on computers over lockdown. Well, I would argue that it also has helped them to develop digital flexibility and resilience, and helps them to develop networking skills, which I'll touch on in a moment. In the next academic year, we will also be looking at putting employability workshops on for your sons and daughters too. So please encourage them to take part. Now, on that issue of networking, making those links with industry is a real positive step that students can take. And for some, it's easier than others. One piece of research that UCAS produced this year showed that if you have a parent who is a doctor, you're 24 times more likely to go into medicine or dentistry at university. So if you haven't got that kind of link in the family, what else can you do? Well, we would encourage students to take part in activities that go on in college. For example, we run careers events every year. Here are some examples. In October, we have universities in the LRC. In January, we have apprenticeship events. And in March, we have general careers events. So all of those are things that students can get into. And in June, we have an HE fair typically, where students can go and speak to representatives from different universities and find out and network with them and find out what it's like on their courses. And we also have Progression Week, which is what we are currently in the middle of. So we run this for parents. But if you didn't know, there have been 60 workshops arranged this week by teachers and staff for students to self-select and go to boost their knowledge. For example, someone asked about policing earlier on. There was a talk about police apprenticeships just today. So please encourage your students to look at the timetable that's been sent out, both to them and to you, about Progression Week this week. And you can also find out details of those workshops on our website. Okay. Final thing, there's all courses over the next year will be attempting to bring speakers in to the classroom through the year. So a great opportunity to network and ask those really important questions. Part-time work, of course, many of our students do that. Don't let them undervalue it. It is absolutely great for their CVs or their personal statements. Does it start this year, next year? Well, my answer to that is no. Put simply, they can start this now. I've got some examples up there of what they can be doing just over the summer. Okay, and the one that you might not know about is this one at the bottom called MOOCs. MOOCs stand for Massive Online Open Source Content. And it's where if you just put MOOC, M-O-O-C, into a search engine and go online, you'll find that there are universities like Stanford and MIT and Harvard over in the States. They're putting up free courses that students can do, and they can go through all of the education elements, all of the reading, etc., and learn just as well, but just doing it online, and it's free. What a great way of developing extra skills over the summer. So in summary then, to strengthen student portfolios, I say qualifications and additional activities such as researching into universities, research into companies, especially via social media, networking with employers during events and in the classroom here in college, work experience and part-time jobs, developing those really important employability skills that the universities and apprenticeship people have told us about tonight, joining relevant clubs and societies to benefit from their support, and just simply ask our staff, whether it's progress coaches, teachers, specialists like me, just ask the question and we will do our best to give that support that we can. In so doing, if students put all of that on, or even some elements of it on top of their qualifications, what we get is a stronger portfolio. It helps them write powerful CVs and personal statements, and it helps to prepare them for an improved interview if they get an interview for an apprenticeship or a university place. Now, I'm going to stop sharing that there, whilst I just very quickly, I'm just going to spend 2 minutes sharing one more element. If you just bear with me 1 second, and then we can finish. The one thing I want to show you is something called SharePoint. Now, SharePoint is careers pages that we have on Moodle. Now, you'll all recognize Moodle, I hope, and on the front page, which is what this is, if you get your son or daughter to click on progression, it takes them to the careers pages for careers and progression. We have a food for thought section here, which is topical content that they can look at any time. And as you scroll down, we've got career software to help them make decisions, information about higher education, apprenticeships, seeking jobs, taking a gap year. Scroll down further, there's current vacancies for apprenticeships. They can look at work experience, they can look at virtual work experience, and they can find out more about recruitment agencies. And finally, we've got this eMag, which is something that we release on a fortnightly basis to help our students to think about what opportunities are out there and to connect with the support that is available to them. And so that's all of my talk for tonight. So thank you very much. I know I've overrun by 2 minutes there. I will just quickly look at the Q&A section and see if there are any direct questions I can answer. I think most of it has been covered. I can't see any other questions that have come up. So with that in mind, then I would just like to say a huge thank you for joining with us. I know 2 hours is a long period of time, but I really hope that you took a lot of positive messages from there. Things are looking up. We're doing our absolute best to support people, and we want them to ask those questions, and we will be putting activities on this week and right the way through and including next year. So thank you very much once more for coming. We really appreciate your support, and we look forward to helping your sons and daughters to be the best that they can be. Thank you.